Welcome back, PlayBASIC coders. My name's Kevin McConey, and let's have a bit of a conversation about what's been going on in the last couple of months. Those been following the web development stuff, still in updating the old website, replacing the back end, the PHP side of it. Last you probably saw was the addition of the members side of it. We're trying to make some simplifications there for making form processing easier to add to different pages and process on the back end of this, so it can be sort of easily verified right across the whole website. As these things grow, you need more and more of that verification. Just a quick little run through of, I've thrown a form onto the community page. It's a mock-up of the email page. Just to give an example, you can actually fill this thing out. Alright, so normal form. Previously this wasn't connected up to anything that would process the form and do the action. Now we've got a kind of standardized way for doing that. So you can hit submit, turn it, and we get an email that's been sent, even though that's not from the contact page. It's a bit of debug stuff up here about, this is what was bundled up, and this is what the user submitted, and that was the final status of it. If it failed, it would give you an error back. At the moment, those errors aren't processed back into the page. So down here where the form was, if something bad happened, it will give you some sort of notification about what happened. So that these forms are verified in the browser space. You've got it generates the custom JavaScript to do this. Upon submission, there's a back end of PHP that does pretty much the same stuff, and plus a few extra verifications on things. So bad word filters, things like email list filters for probable spammers, this kind of stuff. Those things can be expanded as time goes on, and the nice thing about that is that we can add this to the processing of each different form type or field type within a form, and that will then be implemented right across the website. So if we improve the email screening or spamming or whatever you want to call it, then anywhere that email addresses are implemented or needed to be submitted, used, etc., they'll be all compared against that, whereas the old version didn't do that. We've got forms in. We probably do need a bit of extra information in the form declaration as to what to do with the form when it's been completed. So does it insert another piece of markup in its place, or do we have a message that comes out the other side of it, that kind of thing, so the user has some sort of notification of something went okay. And if we can automate that through the validation process and the display process in particular, then that's less work on the back end of the website. Because forms are still being processed, once they pass through the validation layer, the actual doing of the action is then done manually by the website, the page processing code. So I can't just magically add an email form to any page and have it submit and work, even though I can add the form generations stuff to it, and it will generate the HTML, the style sheet, and the JavaScript code required to make it work, and insert those in its place on that page. But on the back end, there's nothing to do the processing of that action. We would have to build up a whole system around this to do that, and at this point I'm not really prepared to do that. Right, jumping out of our website conversation, let's have a conversation about the forums. A couple of things have been posted recently. We'll jump down to Operation Watergate. We've had, actually there's been a few. There's been Mecha as well. This is K-Man's project. It's kind of crazy. They just kind of came out of nowhere, really. He's posted a video demo of it running. It's posted don't think there's a game of this. Sorry, I don't think there's a version of this running that we can play yet, but it's progressed a long way, so give that a bit of a watch. But he's also released a version of Operation Watergate. It's like an isometric impossible mission for those people who are older, like me. He posted some videos, one's still set to private, which is, you know, from his perspective, he wouldn't see that. He would, if he's logged into his YouTube account, he would just see the video, whereas everyone else just sees private, they can't watch it. And he's also put a page up on itch.io for its further development. Had a few teething problems with it, and we did a bit of conversation about doing some optimizations on it. Made a video about that. It's crazy how much time you can invest in doing it. It took almost 7 hours to make that video. Whenever you do a long piece to camera like that, you end up having to go back and do lots of editing, and even the final piece there that I kind of gave up on, really. Still had some sections there I probably could have just cut out for time. I think I shot about an hour and a half and cut it down to about an hour and 5 or something like that, maybe an hour and 10. Cutting 20 minutes of video out of something is pretty tedious. A rule of thumb of how that stuff goes is if it takes an hour and a half for you to record that, it then takes me an hour and a half to render that out and do nothing to it, and probably about half the playtime or a third of the playtime to upload that to YouTube. So just to do a straight recording of an hour and a half, I mean streaming it, I mean just recording it and then uploading it, is really, it's like more like a 3.5 hour job. And so to do editing of it and then make a thumbnail on top of that, it takes a long time. Yeah, hopefully it was useful. I think he's got some ideas about how to approach problems going forward, and I posted some other examples here I thought might be useful as well, actually. One of the problems he was just having with it was just the standard buffer locking issue. It was a mixture of video bleeding and then effects rendering to the back buffer. So if you don't lock the buffer in between things, then each command's got to lock it and unlock it in all the way through. It really adds up that time. So thinking about that conversation, and part of that conversation which was talking about possibly, you know, you could probably render the whole scene. Go back to a picture of it. Bring up a larger one. So there's only marginal overlap there, isn't there? So the floor definitely could be pre-rendered out as an image, and this background image along here, and there's tiles up here. They can all be just one pre-drawn image, and then everything inside there you're applying masks to. I guess, I think he's sorting the scene based on just Z, probably computing the Z from where it's locale, whether it's, you know, I don't know, I didn't check that bit of code actually. You know, so things, you come up with just a rule that says, oh, things to the left have lower precedence than things on the right, so they would stack in that order, you know. I think, I don't know. But here, yeah, you can draw this floor out and then come back and then, so draw the floor as one blit, draw the whole background as one blit, and then do the foreground objects over the top. You could probably do masking, which is what I was thinking actually. So you have foreground occlusion zones. Let's say there was a cupboard in front of this robot there, like this sort of, I guess that's like a kitchenette sort of piece there, isn't it? But let's say it's standing there and you wanted the object to go behind that. We could draw the whole scene cupboards all up front, everything, and then have a mask that's applied to characters. So when the character's behind something and we need the character to be rendered behind it, we paint over the character's pixels to remove the parts that would be overlapping. Sounds complicated, doesn't it? Yeah. So you have like a telephone pole up here, and everything would just move behind that telephone pole because it's behind this clipping plane here. So we would sort of be walking down the scene and then just applying whatever zones over the top of it and then rendering the character out. So we could have a pre-drawn backdrop and then still our characters are going to look like they're walking around inside that space, even though they're rendered after the fact. Which I think is how classic 8-bit titles do this stuff. I don't really know. I haven't done much isometric stuff at all. Anyway, very cool. Was shocked when I saw that screenshot, to be honest. It's like, wow, where'd this come from? So in keeping with that same idea, I wrote some more examples. One was about buffer locking, and kind of gives you an emulation of what this stuff is really doing internally. Like we make up a pretend, where is it? We make a pretend lock buffer unlock screen, we're calling it in this demo. I'm going to draw a dot to simulate what drawing a dot does. In real life, it's actually, the clipping is done, and then it's actually locked if it needs to be locked. But we showed two demos of the same process, just drawing a collection of dots using that same idea. And the performance difference, even in the simulation, is dramatically different. It's much quicker to do. In this first test, we have the dot command is managing the locking of the buffer. So if we're drawing 250 dots, we're locking the buffer and unlocking it 250 times. For this case here, we're locking the buffer once, drawing the dots, and then the draw dot will request a lock, but if it's already locked, it doesn't do anything. So it's going, oh, we need to lock the buffer, but it's already locked, don't do anything, return immediately, draw our dot, go and unlock the buffer, and since it was previously locked before, it's still in that locked state. That means we only have one situation where it's actually doing the actual locking of the surface underneath, which is this driver related stuff that happens in video memory. Ugly stuff, but it has to be done because that's managed memory, and we don't own video memory. The whole system is using that memory all the time. So if something else wants memory bad and you don't lock it, your surface might be turned out of memory, and if you try and access the buffer, your program will crash. Fun, isn't it? Anyway, so this was a secondary way of thinking about this buffer locking stuff. And I thought about the masking problem. I might run the demo. Right. So here's a version of it running. So in the scene, all of those rectangles, they're drawn first. Every one of them is drawn first. And the ships are drawn after this. So the background's drawn completely. Then we come back through and we modify the foreground characters so they appear when they're drawn to it as if they're being occluded by the background. That's it. I can just summarize a 20-minute video in probably one sentence, but that's pretty much what you would need to do. That way you can have a really elaborately drawn, hand-drawn backdrop and have your foreground characters move, have your characters move in things, behind things, around things. You still need to have the masks set up and have the character trigger, when it needs to be clipped by a certain mask. Like here, I'm drawing all the background as rectangles, and I'm coming back through and drawing every rectangle over the top of these the pixels within these images here. Now it's not very, I haven't chosen the most optimal way of doing it. I've just chosen, here's a way of doing it. Here's the concept. Now go run away and find a way that works for you, you know. And that clipping, you know, because in this example here, we've got the boxes have a certain depth, a numeric depth is associated. So you can just tell the clipper to draw or clip against boxes that are in the foreground or in the far background or in any plane within. It's kind of like using the camera and the Z value, but without ever touching that stuff. That's the masking. Code's down the bottom there, of course. And one I posted before was actually something someone posted to Facebook. It's kind of a cool effect, so I thought we'll just make a little PB version of it. In the demo, it's drawing 1 million vertices every iteration. It takes about 100, on my laptop, it takes about 120, 130 milliseconds to refresh the frame. So stepping from an opacity of 0 all the way up to 255. So you're only getting about 8 frames per second, probably 7 frames per second. You can optimize the code out. I'm tempted to go do that as a bit of a fun exercise, but it's a cool pattern, and it was nice to see that kind of effect being produced. And it's a very tiny bit of code. I didn't write the example, by the way. It's just someone else was posted it onto Facebook. And that's the inner loop there. I think if we structure that a bit different, we could just get some micro optimizations through there. But really, if you went through and what it's doing is it's giving you a random number, and I've pre-computed the random numbers. You do a buffer of 1 million of these things, so it's not doing it every frame. That saved about 30 milliseconds. Because we're drawing 1 million points, you know, calling the random function, which if you didn't know, is actually, they're just bit manipulation functions internally. They're rolling and moving some bits around, trying not to destroy anything. But there's divisions inside those generators. And division of floating point numbers is big and ugly. So if you can avoid doing that, and what we could do is you could make that pre-computed table have this logic here included into it. So rather than have this, you could have like a jump table and jump through the logic to save falling through these expressions, because some of the, when A is outside of the boundaries here, it has to fall through this if, this if, this if, and then down to here. That's a lot of operations just to tack on the end of that. So a jump table would work better. To make it dynamic, you'd probably have 2 versions of the pre-computed table in arrays, and then across successive frames update some of these in the background. So you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul in many ways. You're kind of sharing some of the workload. The classic fractal zooming you might have seen on old systems, old 16-bit systems, is done like that. It's fake, yeah, but you know, that's all right. Anyway, that's pretty cool. Head across the forums, check it out, play with it, mess around with it, use and abuse. Other conversations really are about, I'm hoping to get this website stuff again. I was hoping 2 weeks ago to be in the position where I am today, and then we had some problems with real world stuff, as you do. So I can see this being revised a few more times beyond when it's released. As you know, as with all things PlayBASIC and me in general, I do like to revise things and try and make them as the best I possibly can within the skill set that I do have. Thanks for listening. check out those examples on the forums. Well worth it. Operation Watergate in particular. Check out Mecha. Check out the other source code examples that have been posted lately. If you've been writing some code, you want to share it, join the forums, post it up there, or join Facebook and join the group up on Facebook there if you want to, and start your own conversation. Start sharing your ideas, asking questions. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.